So, the role of our panelists in this session has been to stimulate ideas. The purpose of the session is to come up with some ideas. And I think you agree they've done that very well. So I'm going to ask for any questions to our speakers or even comments to be set aside in favor of ideas. Now, you might want to build on some of the points that have been raised. You might say, I thought that was a great one. This is one we should put forward. You might want some questions of clarification, but this is probably less of an opportunity for questions as an opportunity to add some more ideas to the mix we've heard. And what I propose to do is, since we've got a reasonable amount of time, I'm going to use a method that seems to have worked before. I'm going to take a little break and let you have a conversation locally amongst the people around you about what you think you've heard and other things you'd like to contribute about the challenge of making agriculture-related nutrition and health more resilient, okay? And we'll take about 3 to 5 minutes for that. Have a conversation, share some ideas, just get yourselves thinking about points you want to raise. And then what we'll do is we'll entertain some of those. I'll come back to the panel for their take on it, the ideas that we're going to do the same thing up here. And then we'll iterate that through to generate some really nice conclusions. Amanda Wyatt at the end here from A4NH is going to be taking notes on all that conversation and turning that into a useful product. Okay, so let's just take, I'll tell you when it's over, have a chat with your neighbors, think about what can we be doing best in this area. And that probably would have been very productive, except we wouldn't have anything extracted from this foment of discussion. So let's now enter that. Let's keep Amanda very busy with some ideas. And in the interest of getting as many out there and getting some discussion around them, please keep your interventions quite short, but long enough to help us all understand what they mean. Okay, so I'd like to open the floor to ideas, what you've been talking about, suggestions, things that you think are really important. I'll start in this corner here. Thanks. We have a roving mic, so wait for it.
Well, we were talking about demand creation and knowledge and the kind of authoritative leadership that creates that demand and knowledge. The example in Ethiopia is that the health extension agents have really driven successfully nutrition knowledge, whereas in some of the other countries where we've worked, there hasn't been that kind of accountable, respected leadership for nutrition that would cause that kind of breakthrough in awareness.
Just as part of that group, just one statement, that if that's going to happen, we need a huge investment in capacity building.
In what particular, of whom?
Well, I think it can vary from country to country, but we don't have enough nutrition professionals in most countries to do what Ethiopia has done. In Ethiopia,
Brazil invested in a huge number of nutritionists.
So did Ethiopia, but there was an investment to put to do the training and put them at the local level. That has to happen.
Okay, another point. So many hands up. Let me move, I'll come back. Let me move over to this end of the room and then we'll come back.
Thanks. I acted as facilitator for our little group and now rapporteur. And we were talking very specifically about the case that Bonnie presented. And at the heart of it, I think there's a need to change the push and pull relationship between the players in the market. So that's the supply of better quality food and also the demand for better quality food. Awareness is an enormous part of this. Overcoming conservatism is going to be a real challenge. Access to inputs for farmers needs to be laid on, and affordability is going to be a very big issue, both for the supply side and the demand side. So this, I think, creates an opportunity for both public sector and private sector to invest in the long-term development of these local markets to improve nutrition.
Great. Thanks very much. Great. Let's pass back over here for 2 connected comments in the second row. Great. And then Well, please
thank
say
you.
who you are when you stand up. Sorry.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the presenters not only for the important or essential issues you raised, but also for the
Can everyone
interesting.
hear? Okay, we need to get.
Okay. For the interesting presentation you did. The issues what I want to raise, actually the diversified production and this food security is very important for dietary diversification. But we want also to put some very important issues on the bridge. One is the household awareness or bringing behavioral change to the community on the utilization. In addition to that, there should be kind of mitigation on post-harvest loss. Say it livestock product or crop, there are productive areas, and some places even they are not productive, but you know the production, post-harvest production or production loss is very high, especially in developing countries like Ethiopia. You know, they don't have knowledge how to safely store their production. So because of that, they may lose, most portion or we can say most portion of their harvest. And the second place or the second point I want to raise is we need to place household level food preservation skill. They produce vegetables and fruits, but these poor households or people living in the rural area, they don't have knowledge how to preserve these vegetables and fruits safely. This production, they are seasonal. They produce a lot during some season. Then they sell it for cheap. But after that season, they don't have access to get these vegetables and fruits back to consume at the household level. Even if in some places there are in the market, these markets or the markets in the rural area, they are highly dependent on the local production. And the vegetables or fruit, they are coming from very far area during the seasons where they are not, that time they are not producing these things in the place. It's very expensive for them. And even if they are available, they don't have access to purchase.
Great.
So this preservation, household level food preservation skill should be in place. And in addition to these two important points, I want to bring this food safety as a cross-cutting issue.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. So, food storage, both in terms of the productivity and the ability to have food to market, but particularly you're talking about the preservation of foods in between seasons, particularly nutritious foods. That's an important factor here. Yes, please, why don't you follow on and then...
Yeah, Telahon is my name from Concern Worldwide. I just want to say a few things about markets. I'm glad Bonnie raised the point that there's been huge progress even in Kenya in terms of knowledge of nutrition. And even in Ethiopia, over the past few years, there has been huge progress by extension workers and, of course, NGOs like ourselves in terms of getting the message out there. But the markets, they are not really efficient. They don't work. Even in the 80s, when we had one of the worst famines in this country, there is a strong argument that there was really bumper harvest in the south when over 100,000 people died in the north, just because the markets don't work. And it becomes even worse when we talk about fruits and vegetables. Of course, the shelf life, which is really short. And one of the projects my organization implemented is called Fresh Food Voucher, where we provide vouchers to malnourished children and pregnant and lactating mothers. And some of them, they have to work maybe for an hour or two to get to our center and get their voucher. But we give it to them, and imagine a woman taking her portion for a week, and then and the shelf life is very short. Take, say, a banana, it's not going to last, in this weather for a long time. So maybe I would love to hear the panel maybe saying a few things, elaborating on this. How can we make it really practical? It's one thing to have the knowledge. It's also another thing to make the markets work. and of course the points my friend raised in terms of preservation and all that. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. I think the market message is one we want to explore a bit more. Now, I know there's a cluster here. I'll take the next row and then we'll jump to another part of the room. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. We were looking at, we were asking Dino that during your presentation, we did not hear you mention the significant role that indigenous vegetables can play in nutrition. We're saying that because indigenous vegetables have already adapted to the environment, they require very less inputs, and they equally carry significant amount of nutrients, and perhaps we should let them play a very central role in building nutrition resilience in the communities.
Thanks. So there are a couple points we'll bring back to the panel in a second, but let me get a question from towards the back. Way in the back, and then we'll come up. Or a question, I mean a comment. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay.
There's a fact that I think we might ignore, but it's very significant after Bonnie's presentation. There's the fact of the socio-cultural aspect. You look at, by the virtue that that lady who makes income from the beads and charcoal and providing for the family, she might have less control of the land due to that ownership set up in Africa. And you realize that a case study I saw of a neighbor whereby when both the wife and the man were living, the man was in control. But one time, an unfortunate thing happened, the man passed on. And the lady took the full potential of the land. And people are coming to see the good job she was doing. So at least I can see that lady had potential of the land. But the potential, by the virtue that the man was there, she could not do anything. So I think we need to look at that socio-cultural aspect, the role it plays, because basically the man will want cash crops to be on the farm, and the lady wants nutritious foods to be on the farm. The other aspect of Dino was saying about diversified farming, we also need to train our farmers in keeping records. You might have so many crops in the farm, but you don't know what is consuming the other. One crop can be a parasite to the other. So farmers will need to be trained how to keep records.
Thank you. And I'll just take one point from the way back, and then we'll go up to the panel. That's one. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Don Ellison with ICF International. What we discussed was the multi-sectoral approach and some of the barriers to it. In my organization, we have people doing work in climate change, nutrition, maternal child health, emerging infectious disease, and we certainly have these discussions, just as the donors have these discussions about the importance of linkages across. But what happens is the funding streams and the accountability streams are still coming out of silos, and of course that's what we're going to respond to, what people at the mission level are going to respond to, et cetera. And so somehow, I think the term spigot was used, somehow the spigots need, when they get turned on, they need to sort of go into the same bucket so that, you know, we're incented to be able to sort of come together within our organizations to then, you know, help work and solve these problems.
Great, thanks for that. So there's some really nice ideas emerging. Some of them reflect back on some panel thoughts, particularly around how do you make markets work? What are the role of indigenous plants and so on? So I'm going to go back to panel members for maybe some comments in that, but also for their own sort of ideas that have distilled out of the presentations, things we ought to be putting on our list. Okay, so who'd like to go first?